Hello, beautiful people. Please let me know as quickly as you can if this audio and video is coming across as it should. I certainly hope it is. When I just realized I don't need these headphones on, and I do need my shill books. Excellent. So hang on. Allow me to grab my shill books. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very, very much for joining me. This will be a rambling discussion based on notes, not a script or anything. So as many of you know at this point, I can I can get tangled in my own underwear and go rather far afield at times. So bear with me. I think it will be an interesting discussion, a discussion of disorientation, the weaponization of disorientation, with a number of related elements associated with it. So that's what look at somebody in the chat saying I have been wearing pants. Of course I'm wearing pants. What sort of degenerate do you think I am? So yeah, we'll be talking about disorientation and a number of other related elements. Let me just very quickly run through my opening stuff. Please follow this channel, Semigog, as well as A Safer Space. You can do that on BitChute. You can do that on YouTube. On Odyssey, you can't follow the sister channel because I haven't set it up there yet, but it is very, very important that you go over to Odyssey and follow me there. Follow other people like Guide to Culture, follow Millennial Woes, follow all those folks. Please move over to that other platform. I don't understand why I have like north of 13,000 subscribers here and I have like barely over 1,000 there. Odyssey has all these signals at present of being the platform that will become the real alternative to YouTube, which none of these other players like BitChute and the rest, or VidMe in the past, or others that I can't even remember the names of now, had seemed as though they would be. I'm not sure if the grammar worked. I got too lost and got tangled in my own underwear, as I said often happens. So anyway, please follow me on Odyssey. Please also follow me on Telegram, but there's Minds. Though to be fair, I don't think I've even opened Minds in about 3 months. And there is Twitter, and there is Gab, where I'm fairly active. But the best bets are to go over to Odyssey and Telegram. Follow all the folks over there. There are people like American Krogan, who isn't even allowed on YouTube anymore. You can only get his content over there. People like Woes. So please go to Odyssey. Otherwise, thank you to the Praetorian Chads who make all of this possible. Their names were listed in the introduction. I want to thank everyone who supports the channel. If I can manage to get myself out of this damn city and into a new location, that support is going to be increasingly important. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to soon flee from the city. Stay tuned on that. It's all in development. I will give you some more news on that in just a bit. Okay. Science fiction book, Vinculum, set in a dystopian future. It's a sci-fi tale of a book thief who is pursued by remorseless corporate hitmen and esoteric sect of assassins. It's entirely dystopian. I think it's set in the year 2076, primarily in Istanbul. You can get these over on Amazon under the name Oliver Perrin, which you can see here. And there is my collection of poems, Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth. I recognize that most of you are probably not the poetry types. However, I rather like this. You can find it over on Amazon as well. That's under the name Oliver Timken Perrin. So enough of my shilling at the outset. Let's give just a few moments for everyone to come here. Oh, I should say also, Lital very kindly sent me this. Delicious maple syrup. Maple syrup, which I mix with my apple juice for evenings like this one. Is there anyone who doesn't like maple syrup better than just about everything? I'm growing much more simple in my old age as I arrive in my winter years, as I begin to be sucked down, hunched, and bowed by gravity. Although thankfully I've checked my height. I haven't begun to shrunk yet. Consolation prize. Yeah, as I get older, I like maple syrup. I'm also getting into jams and jellies. Like I'll occasionally go upstairs. If it's good jam, you know, never hurts to go up and just have yourself a spoonful of good jam. 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 Anyway, thanks to Lital for this, what looks to be delicious maple syrup, and I will soon test it I will soon test it and see about all this. Okay. Allow me to pour myself a drink and we will get started. What is this business of disorientation? Well, I was watching some kind of absurd TV show, and almost all TV shows are at this point absurd. And it hit me again. I know, Black Pill talks about a lot of this kind of stuff. American Krogan talks about it with video games. Many people have gone into analyzing the different eruptions of the inane or the poisonous that we gloss as media these days. And like many of you, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, could it be more psychopathic? Could it be more just insane, fucked up? Could it be? It's madness everywhere. And there's this whole idea of the totality of what's coming. I remember back in the late 90s, mid to late last third of the 90s, everyone was constantly talking about convergence. These were the early days where you could get like an ISDN line that would be, digital for your internet, but it would also be your phones. And everyone was beginning to see that you would, eventually television would all be lumped together. You get your cable package or your DSL. DSL basically replaced ISDN. Hopefully I said ISDN before and not DNS. Who knows? I can't. Anyway, the idea was convergence, and convergence was just another way to say totalizing universalism in terms of control, everything bound within the one ring. And it's only gotten worse. It's everywhere. Man, I didn't like that much when I was younger. I like things more like a gin and tonic, but I'll tell you what, man, an old fashioned these days made with maple syrup. Truly delicious. So I was looking, and I've already warned you all, this is going to be winding all over the place, so bear with me. But it's just looking at the total aspect of it, the way in which everything has been compromised. And because of what gets called convergence and is increasingly convergence, there's just more and more that's organized underneath one umbrella. As the refrain of diversity gets belched and mumbled endlessly on all sides by them, it's becoming, as many people have noted before me, much less diverse. And so, I had this idea. I mentioned it recently in a stream with someone. Maybe it was on my own channel. Maybe it was me over on AA's or something. I can't remember. But I had this idea emerge, this idea of it being, all of this being a kind of Bible. In the original Greek, Bible means like a text or a scroll, or more specifically, a book in the sense of a part of a larger work. And that's the sense in which I'm using this now. But I'm using the definite article, the Bible, because despite the superficial appearance of all these things coming from different places, where did I put this damn it seems, that you're seeing it on televisions, or you're seeing it on iPads, or you're seeing it on telephones. But in fact, it's kind of like the Indian restaurant in New York, where you have this sneaking suspicion, which, is not entirely unrealistic, that all of these restaurants are getting their shit from the same kitchen. That's the sense in which I'm talking about this as being a totalizing Bible. And all of this, hopefully, it will become apparent that by talking about this total saturation of a single message through all the seemingly disparate channels of communication, it provides a basis for the way in which the disorientation that I will shortly discuss is affected, brought about. But it's first necessary to kind of look at this basic idea of the Bible, the new Bible. People read from their screens. It's very fashionable now to look at texts that can be updated without you knowing it. So there's no certainty. There's no fixedness in those texts, because if you go back, it's HTML or hypertext or whatever the hell it is. It's ones and zeros at any rate, and so there's nothing fixed on a page. These things can be changed. how difficult would it be to put together an algorithm to basically just go through and make Shakespeare trans approved? And there are already like small ways in which this is happening. When I go sometimes to grab a Shakespeare quote that I half remember, but I want to check my memory of it. These days, it's increasingly, inaccurate. I go look, and they'll have two versions of the text side by side. They'll have Shakespeare, and then they'll have some bullshit version of bringing it down to date. Can you imagine not being able to follow Shakespeare's English? I mean, I'm sure have a few footnotes where it gets a little rough. I'm a reader, the Bill Hicks reader. Looks like we got ourselves a reader. So I do quite a bit of reading. I'm not bad at it. And there are some spots where I'm like, what does he mean? And then you have to go look at the footnote. Oh, I get it. It was used in that sense in that day, right? But to have an entirely rewritten text for the dribblers, for the groundlings, for the imbeciles, for the fools. So you've already got these parallel texts, and the original texts are already being supplanted. The seeming variety of channels and sources masks a total uniformity that I'm calling the Bible. And we could just look at television shows, video games, news reports, radio programs, and in particular, anything that's quote unquote fictional. You can see sort of certain basic themes emerging. There is only one story. There is nothing but this single story. And it has a number of accepted elements. Where's my one of them? Here's one. I made a little initial list of some of the themes and facets of the only approved story, which is made available to us through the only approved source of information, which masquerades as a multiplicity, which I'm here glossing as the Bible. Let us have a look at some of these themes and facets of the only approved story. Well, this is a commonplace one everyone will be familiar with. White men are violent, shallow, bigoted, insecure, and ridiculous. Humans are destroying the earth, and we therefore unquestionably, it's blasphemous to question it. We are therefore unquestionably deserving of cataclysm. Religion is a great evil if whites believe it. It is it's more or less equivalent to brainwashing, and it is the most dangerous thing from our history that must just be very carefully watched for, because it is so dangerous. It is so backward. It is so destructive if whites believe it. You're not going to hear it about Buddhism. I mean, unless you get something like, the Rohingya and, problems in Myanmar, occasionally there'll be some old-fashioned leftists who will come in and be like, well, it can be in some cases, but no, just generally, if white people believe it religiously, it's bad. It's bad. It's terrible. It must be removed. And as I said, it's more or less equivalent to brainwashing. You see this over and over again in everything, everywhere, which is, again, why I refer to it as the Bible. And just to keep everybody, in alignment as regards what we're talking about here, I'm going over the one aspect, an important one, of the totality, the totalitarian centralization of messaging masquerading as a multiplicity that ensures that there is only one story, which is one aspect of how the disorientation I hope to discuss is affected. As I said, this is going to ramble. So, if you want it to be super clean and bullet points, people who've been following my channel for a while know that you seldom get that. I would have written you a shorter note, as I often say. Here's another one. Surely you'll all be familiar with it. The world will be better with women in charge. And anyway, I mean, they deserve it. Where are you going to look and not see that reflected in radio and television and movies and TV commercials? I mean, it is universal in the West anyway, which is what I'm talking about here. I should say that fairly. Maybe they're getting it in India. I tend to doubt it. Maybe they're getting it in China. I tend to doubt it. So when I talk about universal and totalizing, totalitarian, I have reference, and I realize that this compromises my assertion that it's universal and totalitarian, but I do have reference to the West at this point. Think about it as universal and totalitarian and totalizing as a category that is aimed at whites. So we got the world will be better with women in charge. What's another facet of the universal story that comes out of all media channels? In the future, all races will live side by side as if a deck of cards had been shuffled together, and yet somehow they will remain entirely distinct. You can get 2,000 years in the future, and there'll be like two little blonde kids who'll pop their heads up out of the Bucky Fuller geometric dome with their space rifles on their shoulders, and just across from them, their dearest friends will be two black African kids and an Asian boy, and they'll all be distinct. 2,000 years in the future, you just shuffle the deck together, and yet somehow they all remain distinct. Give me a fucking break. Rather, in the future, it is much more likely that everything will look like Brazil times 5. All right. Minorities. This is another facet of the only universal approved story. Minorities, due to their deep lived experiences, are uniquely qualified to give good advice, understanding and patient advice, tolerant advice to white people. Now, there's one particular minority that you always see as like an elder figure that comes and is always ready to listen, always has a certain feel to them of being accepting and being concerned and really having your best interest at heart. You'll see that particular minority over and over and over again, prepared to give you good advice. But still, you'll have other minorities that are uniquely qualified because of those deep lived experiences to give advice to white people. Sometimes they'll be black, very rarely Asian, sometimes Hispanic. Basically, whoever it is that happens to be there under the pretense that they call a plot, other than a white person, will be the person within that dramatic arc most qualified to give sensitive and understanding advice to white people. Another one, white men, either consciously or unconsciously, always hate their sons. They hate and resent their sons. They always try to impose horrible things on their sons. If they have a gay son, they say things like, "Get out of my house. Your mother and I don't need you anymore. Get out." They just, their own flesh and blood, their own child that they've raised for years. They hear he's gay and they're like, "Get out. I can't look at you." What? Like, even people who have a problem with homosexuals, I don't see it happening. They're like, "Get out of my house." And yet at the same time, these same people will claim that, they're trying to do conversion therapy or whatever because they're concerned about their son. Anyway, you know the drill. What's another one? Oh, here's another one. Women can fight at least as well as men. The next one. And this is a personal favorite of mine. Saying, "You don't have to do this," is always an effective way to stop violence. You don't have to do this. Is there any more commonly stated expression in across the various ostensibly separate channels of the Bible? Is there anything more commonplace than "you don't have to do this"? I think the only thing that competes with it for ubiquity is what is it? "I'm not going to let this happen." Right. Good luck with that, kid. And then generally, here's another one. Generally speaking, sharing your feelings is always the best course of action. Can you imagine? Is there anything? Well, I would say, is there anything that is, more disproved by actual experience of life than the idea that the best course of action is always to share your feelings? But I suppose this entire list is equally ridiculous. Nevertheless, these things, and all of you should have had some experience with these at this point. I mean, the vast majority of you probably, as I read these down the line, you're like, check, yeah, Oliver, you're getting born, check, yeah. These are everywhere, and they're entirely untrue. That's why we have terms like gaslighting, because it is everywhere. Now, when you go a bit further afield, or let's say you expand the scope of your consideration, you have things going on in terms of the courts and law. Remember, critical race theory started primarily among lawyers. trying to find a way to subvert, to gnaw at the roots of the tree, etc. You've got it in television, you've got it in advertising, you've got it in law, you've got it in schools, you've got it in the workplace, you've got it in HR departments, you've got it in the military, law enforcement, civil service, religion, the various religious faiths, at least the ones that are primarily white. Although it's expanded as well. I think you probably find variations of this stuff all over the place in different types of Judaism as well. They're trying to do it with the Muslims, with the what are they called? Ahmadiyya. I can't remember, but they've got a few paused versions of Islam that they've tried to push out there. They don't do very well generally. So it's everywhere, and it's all horrifically emotional. And it's all just an exercise in hysteria and histrionics. It's just constantly emotional. Like, just watching these television programs, I'm like, is there no point at which anyone suspends being a blubbering idiot? And, no, there isn't. No, there isn't. Like, I watch some of these, Walking Dead shows, and they're walking around with like zombies around them, and they just stop to have emotional discussions in the middle of an area where there's considerable threat, or they'll just stop to have an acting out little fight or spat in a situation where somebody could die suddenly. But all that can be put on hold because we have to have an emotional fight, because as we know from the last of those ones I've listed, generally speaking, sharing your feelings is always the best course of action, even if you're like hidden in a cabinet trying to avoid some monster with a sharp sense of hearing. It still makes sense to talk about your feelings. Yeah. Und so, look at this, what's going on around us. I've talked about this in the past. You have the idea of imitation and how children imitate. So as I've said, longtime viewers of the channel will have heard this, some of them maybe twice, but just to knit it all together here, I'll cover it very, very briefly. Children imitate based upon what they see as being successful behavior. And as I often say, you don't see them out there playing in the, on the playground, saying, I'm going to be a junkie and I'm going to be a bum. Now, I don't know, the subversion has been going on for quite some time now. So perhaps that has been presented consistently and falsely enough for long enough as something that is in fact positive, that they're, maybe they're turning it around. But once upon a time, and still today, that children are not going to imitate things that are obviously unsuccessful, that don't yield status or success, or are not desirable in some way. They're not like, I'm gonna be suicidal and covered in pig shit. They're gonna say, I'm an astronaut, or I'm gonna be a fireman, Mary. I'm gonna be a whatever, Johnny. However, we do what we do based on imitation. And with the oversaturation of all these falsehoods, all the various themes of the Bible, as it were, we're in a situation where the thing that is entirely contraindicated can be presented as though it is successful in some fashion. The example I often use is rap, right? You're carrying a pistol in your pants without a holster. Your pants are hanging down around your ass. The shoes you're wearing, the laces aren't tied. Try running with your pants down around your ass and your boxer shorts hanging out, and wearing a pair of Timberlands that have no laces in them, with a Glock in your back pocket. You're likely to trip and fall down. Your pistol's going to fall out. God knows what's going to happen. It doesn't work. It's the same thing as like Afrodenture and a bunch of gold chains and calling women bitches. Is that really how you develop a stronger relationship with women that will yield stronger successive generations and better families? No. Or just look at the idea of taking the pistol out and holding it sideways. Do you get a good return to sight picture when you're firing sideways? With some designs of slides and ejection ports, is it more likely that you're going to jam? So recoil control, jamming, return to sight picture, and just getting your initial sight picture in the first place. It's a bunch of nonsense. That's not how you shoot effectively. And yet it is presented as though it is, through this falsehood of this universal narrative that's being pushed. And so people imitate it because they've been poisoned, because it's been suggested to them that is in fact good, but it's not. It's noise. It's not signal. Or you could say it was noise, not signal, if in fact it were not an alternative signal crafted with malice aforethought to subvert and destroy. So I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm just like, man, everywhere I look, everywhere they're doing this. They're constantly trying to make everything more poisonous, more unreal. And they're removing all the points of orientation. And in particular, it looks like they're putting together their version of the Rwandan radio station. Some of you have probably heard about that. I like to talk about it more and more. What was the Rwandan radio station? Look very, very briefly. Let's have a look at this, shall we? The Rwandan radio station was called Radio Télévision Libre de Mi-Colin. And I'm probably horribly butchering that pronunciation. And who cares? Except for my froggy French-speaking friends. And anyway, by mispronouncing things, I give them something to bitch about. As Tim often says, the French don't care what you say as long as you pronounce it right. Well, this radio station broadcasts from July of 1993 to July of 1994. They say it played a significant role in inciting the Rwandan genocide. It was widely listened to by the general population. And it, talked about the opposition as being cockroaches and incited people to kill them. And eventually there were folks on the street who were hacking people, into multiple pieces with pangas. And by the way, there's a guy who follows my channel. I won't name him, but who says that he was there for that. I've asked him in the past to come on and talk about it. And understandably, he says he's not real interested in it, but perhaps one day he will change his mind, because that would be a very, very interesting thing indeed to hear about from someone who is a witness and they're on the ground as the pangas flashed in the firelight, as it were. So this Rwandan radio station metaphor is something that's been on my mind very, very much of late. And, it's this gaslighting that I've talked about. And it would be one thing, this type of gaslighting and the incitement of the various parts and pieces against one another, against each other, the incitement of resentment, hatred, and desire for violence among the various elements of what passes as a collective these days. So it would be one thing if we had simply been deprived of consensus. That's one thing. You run into problems there. Even in a culturally, ethnically homogenous arrangement, you have very different ideas about how to handle things, and finding some way to establish consensus, if not perfectly, at least in some pragmatic sense, is a large part of questions like what kind of majority is necessary. Is it enough that it be literally just one person more than 50%? You need an overwhelming majority. There are various ways that we try to tackle the problem of dealing with a consensus. So it would be one thing if, as a collective, we had been deprived of consensus. However, it's gone much, much further than that. So over quite some time, and increasingly via the introduction of multiculturalism as the new interpretation of the melting pot, many of you will have caught that, the sleight of hand, where the melting pot has somehow been redefined as multiculturalism. The 1908 play called The Melting Pot was to justify very likely the earlier waves of heterogeneous migration. And yet I'd at this point almost go back to the idea of the melting pot. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll take that over multiculturalism any day, because at least the idea is that you all get brought down to the same basic set of standards, or some shared set of beliefs and assumptions is sought after, is the goal. But we don't even have that. It's happened for some time, and increasingly, that we have been set at each other's throats via this mechanism of the Bible with its different stories. You can also call the Bible that I'm talking about the Rwandan radio station. I have a meme I share over on Twitter where I'm basically like, the internet is the Rwandan radio station. It's one giant Rwandan radio station, and it's being used to amplify everything. You always have to conceptualize in the background the idea that these elements are increasingly centralized, increasingly controlled, and are being presented with this uniformity of control that allows for uniformity of voice and message. And then you get these different elements that I talked about here just a moment ago that are the facets of the story you're told with the Bible, which of course are aimed at smearing, denigrating, slandering, and inciting attacks against whites, splintering the genders, splintering the age cohorts, splintering the sexes, I should say, forgive me, splintering everything, relationships between children and their parents, between grandparents and their grandchildren, between teachers and students, between men and women. It's everywhere. And that goes back to a thing that you're all well familiar with me talking about, the total nature of the unrestricted warfare. But tonight we're talking about how the centralized nature and the increasingly total centralized nature of control allows for the presentation of messages that, as I just discussed in the case of imitation, if you can present a false imitation and do it enough through every available medium or each touch point with the target, then it will create an illusion of unsuccessful behavior being successful. And really, somebody should just basically sit down and write a book at this point about how everything that we unrealistically grace with the name of culture in the West at this moment amounts to little more than an experiment, and how far you can take gaslighting a people by inserting this false picture of reality through the centralized control. Everything that we're dealing with it's all like one big story of like, how long does this go on before everything falls to pieces, and every day it looks closer. So that's what we're dealing with. We've lost the consensus. We've had the increasing polarization. We've got the Rwandan radio station. And then you have the idea of these false flags that are constantly being used. Now, a false flag it's literally the definition of disorientation, because you use a flag, capture the flag, you put the flag at the North Pole in order to know where that is. You flag things to draw attention to them. The flag is what you use to rally troops around. A false flag means you have a point of orientation, literal or metaphorical, which is unreliable. But it goes further in terms of the Rwandan radio station, because in order to justify the increasingly draconian bullshit that they're all up to now, they need to create the appearance of an opposition, and one that's dangerous, that's inhuman, that can be crushed utterly, because it should be, because they're not even human. Recently, I was just watching Endeavor's clip on that, where he was talking about Schmidt and the one aspect of like taking away the humanity of the target, thereby to justify the doing of anything to them. So I recommend it. It's a recent one he did on the totalitarian stuff in the last few weeks. It got pulled from YouTube, but you can see it over on Odyssey, which is why I'm again recommending everybody just go the fuck over to Odyssey and subscribe. So you've got this idea of the false flags, and a couple of things are going on there. On the one hand, you've got the false idea of an opposition, but through a sort of inevitable dialectical progression, that false seed gathers around it, and the glowies always depend on this, the feeblers, the people who pay all the monthly dues for the various hate organizations and keep them operational, like the FBI. In putting together the false opposition through this sort of unavoidable process, there's a kind of there's the appearance of the opposition, there's the appearance of a foe, there's a thing to congeal against, and so necessarily they get enough cranks and sociopaths and freaks and neckbeards in their orbit that they begin to have some kind of a core as various suckers come over. So that's another aspect of the polarization. So this dialectical coalescence leads to, this more substantial, or at least apparent, opposition. So there's dialectical, and therefore there's cycling, polarized, binary opposition. And at the same time, there is, as though we didn't have enough fucking problems, there is the shattering effect of the weaponized multiculturalism. And the weaponized multiculturalism serves to destroy the distinction between us and them, and to just sow utter confusion as regards who is what, and whose side am I supposed to be on, and what am I supposed to be doing? What, How do I orient? One of the most fundamental ways in which human beings orient is in group and out group. And here we see the application of unrestricted warfare in a total sense to create utter disorientation as regards the us and the them. And in fact, anyone who attempts to effectively, well, politically, it's in the Schmittian sense, anyone who's an enemy who attempts to even introduce an us-them distinction is thereby made a target. Of course, people on the other side, as long as they're targeting the enemy, that is the approved enemy from the establishment with its centralized narrative and its sowing of confusion, they're all right. It's okay to institute an us-them distinction there. It's just, I realize this is blackpilling, but there's just this exponentially expanding awareness of the cascading and expanding, again, exponential way in which there's this total gaslighting interposition of falsehood between the thing that is interpreted and the party that is doing the interpretation. And it basically, like if you think about attacks on command and control structures through attacks on signals, which is one of the military applications of signals intelligence, you destroy how the organism operates. I mean, think about this. Is actually something that was interesting to me. I got tagged by a black widow spider when I'm doing some work down in my basement. And I didn't find out about it till later. I mean, within a couple hours, I was up, covered in sweat in my bed and getting just weird cramps up and down through my body. And it's not like where, you have, well, maybe it's a little like heat cramps, but it's not like some muscle you used. It's just like, holy shit, this set of muscles is cramping over here and this one's cramping and it makes no sense. It's not any muscle I've strained. Hell, it wasn't a muscle that I even fully was aware of before. And then I had waves of numbness for about a week. I had a band because I got tagged on my hip, right around a little bit from my ass. And I had a band around my hips that just totally went numb. And I'm lucky that I got tagged by the black widow there. So I went and looked because I was trying to figure out if it was a brown recluse or a black widow because I hadn't seen the spider. I just saw the swollen spot with the two little marks on it. And I didn't get any of the necrosis from the brown recluse, which is how I determined it was black widow. Also finding black widows later, right near that part of the basement. But I discovered in looking into the venom, it's a neurotoxin, and it does what it does by screwing up the ability of the nerve to send a signal, which of course creates false signals and all kinds of problems. It's a very, very interesting thing. The venom itself interrupts the nervous system and its ability to signal. So when you think about something that interposes falsehood in between that which is interpreting and that which is interpreted, you've got a similar idea, and it goes over to signals intelligence too. But what's important now is there's a total aspect of it. We're not talking about an index prohibitorum. We're not talking about post no bills where only approved parties can do outdoor advertising, or the king's men or the aldermen will go through town and pull down bills that aren't permitted. We're talking about a total sense of control of the message, not only in the sense that they can pull down messages with which they disagree, but they've got a way of universally pushing out messages to their targets across the world. I mean, we've all seen the Build Back Better, and then it's, Build Back Better, and it's, Build Back Better, and it Build Back Better, fucking Build Back Better everywhere. Wow, that's a uniform message. I mean, is this again, where all the Indian restaurants in New York get their food made in one kitchen? Increasingly, it seems it is. So we continue. We covered the Rwandan aspect, the Bible with its various narratives, the imitation with children and imitating a falsehood yields the illusion that it's successful. We've got the idea of the dialectical coalescence with false flags and opposition and binary shit, which is always rotating because the dialectic, and you got to go look at it, the commies actually worship it. It rotates and shifts its positions back and forth as it slowly goes clockwise around until, the conservatives that seem to be over here are in a short period of time over here at the opposite end, as you see like mocked and stone toss comics. So we have disorientation, with the multiculturalism, which prevents the establishing of any kind of consensus. But this disorientation is a very, very literal kind. And it's, again, everywhere. What do you do with that when you can't trust anything? The mechanisms of consensus cannot operate as they normally would. And there are traditional ways, and when I say traditional, really what I'm talking about is something that runs from biology up into culture in a non-arbitrary way. And I think that's a very important thing. You know what? I'm going to write that down. Allow me to just capture this, because I've been thinking about it, but that's a particular way of saying it that I like. Tradition is culture rooted in biology. That's my definition of tradition. And that's the respect in which I am a traditionalist. And I think that's a worthwhile way to crystallize it. Because what you have is the tabula rasa crew, the utopian crew, and their whole riff is that it's all fucking arbitrary at the end of the day. You know, there are no real sexes and genders and blah, 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 blah. Men and women fight like men, and it's all bullshit. The tradition I'm interested in is not just some arbitrary practice that has been considered across generations, centuries, across cultures, you know, geographically. It's not something that's just honored by time. It's a thing that is honored by time to the extent that, and insofar as, it's rooted in biology and therefore is truly perennial. A perennial tradition is one that goes back to biological roots that are non-arbitrary. And the more perceptive among you at this point will have noticed that you got the theme of arbitrariness and the theme of things that are not arbitrary. And I think we're going to come back to this in just a bit. But first, I want to go a little further with this idea of mechanisms of consensus, because I was on Twitter before this, and one of the people who saw that this clip was going to be coming up said to me, hey, are you, in talking about disorientation and the rest, are you going to talk about ways to fight it, how to push back against it? And I was like, you know, that would be useful if I didn't just want to like black pill everyone and make them cry. So in response to that request, I took a look, and there are certain fundamental ways in which consensus is established. One of those ways is by looking to tradition. Another one is looking to authority. Another one is to look at landmarks, very much in the sense of physical space and orienting oneself within it. Well, and there is religion as well, which is the idea of transcendence. And that you could meditate on for quite a bit. Like if no one has ever, how do I say this? That's bad English. For someone who has never gone and lived in a foreign country and learned a foreign language, there is a certain amount of perspective about their own country and their own language and their own peoples and their own behaviors that they simply can't get. Now, you can approximate it by being an outsider, in the sense that you don't have to travel far and learn another language if you've been pushed so far out and are, you know, have rocks thrown at you until you stop moving. You know, you can approximate it. But what you're missing with that, which will get you close, is not quite what you get when you move to another country and learn the other language, because then you learn the mental processes, the alternative traditions, and the rest. Now, they can be problematic too. And you yourself will be an outsider there to some extent, but it has a way of helping you through with a kind of like training wheels to go through experiences that help you to get perspective about your own point of origin and the way things are done there. It's like the famous remark from, who is it? I think it's Archimedes. Says, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I'll move the world. Well, he doesn't mention a fulcrum, fine. But what's most important for me is he says, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, which means somewhere outside of it that will enable you to see it as a whole and exert pressure upon it. That's what you get if you go somewhere else, to another place. But for the most part, people don't have that, so they cannot look at their own traditions. It's the whole thing of being a fish in a certain kind of water. You don't see it because it's what you breathe. It's what you're surrounded by. But if we look to God, I lost a thread there that I was trying to cover earlier, but hopefully I'll roll back around to it. I warned you this would be winding. You've got authority, you've got tradition, you've got landmarks, you've got religion. I think I lost it with religion in the vertical axis. Yeah, a vertical axis. Yes, that's what it was. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. On the one hand, I was looking at how you move to another culture in order to be able to get perspective about the world you live in. But there's a way in which you can take that distance and make it vertical, which is the transcendent, and call it the y-axis, right? The vertical axis. That does something that goes even further than the notion of stepping laterally over to another culture. It raises you up with a 30,000-foot view of manifestation itself, looked at from the view of the sacred or the transcendent, that yields a different type of distance from the world, at least theoretically, allowing one to get the perspective necessary to judge it by a different set of standards that can, in various cases, be useful, right? That's the idea of the active and contemplative life, with the angels going up and down Jacob's ladder, right? They go up the ladder, the vertical axis, and that yields a certain type of perspective in contemplation. But that's not operating in isolation. They then come back down the ladder to action in the world, because, knowledge isn't power. Power is knowledge applied. Hence, you must have the contemplation and the action. But all of this shit's gone because we see that authority, auctoritas, the idea of being a trustworthy figure to whom people may turn, is attacked through the typical leftist approach of ad hominem, right? The very thing that makes you an important point of orientation in the culture, which is your authority, which exists independent of what you say. The reputation of having authority is built up over time by being correct, and by giving wise and prudent and helpful advice. But in its essence, once it has been earned, it is your person itself which has that authority, much as it is your person itself which has honor. And so you have the leftist attack on authority itself by ad hominem, attacks. It's like, why would anyone listen to, what Plato had to say, or what Dionysius the Areopagite had to say? I guess that's not a bad one, because that might have been pseudographia, although there's an argument about that. Or who cares what it was that George Washington said, or who cares what Caesar or Cicero wrote, because they're all just pale patriarchal penis people. They're old dead white men, right? It's just sort of ad hominem writ large, right? And that attacks authority. Take a look at tradition. Well, tradition has been counterposed against progress, and progress must therefore destroy tradition. So your point of orientation, which is authority, is under attack and destroyed. Your point of orientation, which is tradition, is under attack and destroyed. The former via ad hominem attacks, tradition itself; the latter via progress, parentheses, nihilism, right? Landmarks themselves in space offer you a way of orienting. So what do we see consistently attacked? Flags, statues, certain types of buildings, right? Monuments. They're physically landmarks, and they're taking them down. So your new point of orientation, your new and approved form of orientation, is something different. It's like, some colossal African head that, like, even some of the old Benin sculptures are, that they're all right. They're not that bad. They look okay. You have some West African sculptures that are, clearly somebody had talent and a vision, but they've got these just nauseating interpretations of a West African sculpture that look like if you took a little gray man from a highway, a midnight abduction and anal probe, and spray painted it black and made it sort of cartoony, and then you lift this monstrosity up on a giant pedestal and replace whatever used to be there. They take down the statues themselves, the landmarks themselves, the flags themselves, the monuments themselves. Or look at religion. On the one hand, you have atheism, to just utterly sweep away anything like a sacred dimension or a vertical dimension, anything like the idea of the transcendent. And instead you get your atheism, or you get your flattened false religion that is just utterly materialist. Many people have talked about it. I've talked about it. The main point here is that to answer the question that the guy asked me over on Twitter, he's like, are there ways that you can deal with it? Are there ways you can fight against it? Yeah, you have to have authorities that you can turn to. Look at AA. He recently did a great clip where he just utterly smashed. I mean, he did it in the first one, but in the second clip against this Adam Friended and this other guy, Shit or Skiff, or let's just call him Shit. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he just abused them. He smashed them. It was just utter mayhem. He scraped his boots off on them. And they had been attacking his use of Evola, and they called it an appeal to authority. And you're like, well, wait a minute. They're like, that you're not a scientist, so you can't understand it. You must talk to a scientist. And then they'll turn around and they'll be like, you can't use this guy who's an expert on that thing because that's an appeal to authority. It's like they're absolutely inconsistent, absolutely hypocritical, absolutely disoriented, blubbering, mumbling, slobbering bullshit on all sides. But anyway, I wanted to point out that authority, tradition, landmarks, and religion were ways in the past that we dealt with disorientation. And it's important to say more specifically what we did was we oriented. We had orientation. And now the very idea of orientation is itself under attack. And that can be personal orientation. It can be collective orientation. Now, I'm not going to do this forever. I will get on to a little bit more of this, and then we'll have some question and answer in just a bit. So don't be worried. I'm not just going to like drone at you endlessly. But I want to drone at you just a little bit more, friends. Just a wee bit more. I want to drone at you. So, how does one orient? I mean, there's a metaphor here which I think is useful. Let me see if I can share my screen. Is this working? Yeah, let's see. Does this work? Yeah. Is this coming up? Oh, that's the wrong one. Whoops, sorry. I want this one. There we go. Sorry, boomer moment, ladies and gentlemen. Open up, biatch. The fuck? Oh, it's open over here. All right. Where is it? Instruments. You guys know what this is? This is a guy named Doolittle. And he was the first one to successfully fly blind in his aircraft, right? Which means they understood early on that if you want to be able to fly an aircraft, for example, at night where you don't have good visibility, and not just fly, but also take off and land, right? Takeoff is the most dangerous thing that you can do in the airplane, except for landing the airplane. Your greatest risk is when taking off, and even greater when landing. And so they figured we got to come up with a way where people can fly blind. So what you're looking at here is the instrument panel from Doolittle's Blind Flight. I think this was in the 30s. I can't remember. I should have looked at it more closely, but I just went and pulled the image. So he has a certain number of instruments upon which he is forced to rely in flying blind. And you have to think about what we're dealing with, right? How does one orient in this set of circumstances we're in? How does one make decisions? We're dealing with more and more information at a greater scale. I guess that's redundant. And the need to do that requires us to engage with mediated sources of information and to process mediated information at scale, because it's coming through all these channels of communication, which I've just described as a kind of Bible. The centralized, totalitarian, total control over all the means of information carries with it ineluctably the fact that our mediated sources of information that are required because we're processing more and more sources of news and different channels and all kinds of things from across the world means that we can't rely on it. So basically what I'm getting at here with this damn metaphor, I'll just make it fast, is that this dude's trying to fly blind. Imagine that we're like Doolittle trying to fly blind, except there's some motherfucker rubbing his hands together, screwing up all our readings from all our instruments. So you're not just flying blind. You're attempting to deal with this disorientation, flying blind, using instruments whose readings have been vitiated, that are unreliable. And not just unreliable in the sense that, there's more there's more noise than signal, or unreliable in the sense that they occasionally go in and out, but it's in a random way. No, they're unreliable in the sense that each one of them has been subverted and is being intentionally used in a concerted way to give you the wrong reading. The reading that women fight as well as men. The reading that, generally speaking, sharing your feelings is always the best course of action. The reading that religion is a great evil if it's a white religion. The reading that humans are destroying in the earth and deserve cataclysm, right? Everywhere you look, that white men are violent, shallow, bigoted, insecure, and ridiculous, and always hate their sons, right? It's not just that one instrument is subverted. It's that they're all subverted. And it's that they're subverted in a fashion that has been concerted in order to yield an alternative picture that is false and destructive. That's what we're dealing with here, like Doolittle on the first blind flight, except every single instrument he relies upon is being fucked with. And this creates enormous stress because the outcomes of one's decisions matter. As I said, I'm thinking about getting out of the city now, and I'm trying to make a decision about what to do and when to do it based upon, when the best opportunity to make a dash from the flaming building is and when it'll be too late. And yet I have to rely upon these mediated sources of information, and all those signals are being screwed with. So it's a big deal. This is, I have some other pictures here. What other ones did I want to touch on here? Do any of them bear thus far with what I've looked at? Oh, one of the ways with authority is that you would have the figure who has authority, and yet auctoritas, the idea of authority, has been replaced with celebrity. And this was actually a nice little one. I went and looked at Etym Online, the etymology dictionary online, and he just chose, the guy who puts it together, it's a one-man show, actually picked a really great quote. So you got the idea of celebrity from Old French célébrité, celebration, or directly from Latin celebritatem, nominative celebritas, multitude, fame, from celeber, frequented, populous, meaning condition of being famous person, right? Celebrity. But look at this quote the guy just chose to put here. It's actually quite a good one. It's from Dodds's work, The Greeks and the Irrational, which I've actually read. When the old gods withdraw, the empty thrones cry out for a successor. And with good management, or even without management, almost any perishable bag of bones may be hoisted into the vacant seat. And I thought that fit nicely with the idea that we've replaced the idea of auctoritas and authority with the idea of the celebrity who's been paid to appear in this particular advertisement to tell you that we have to sob together. And also what we need to do is we need to celebrate together our celebrity and our wiseness in choosing this course of action that involves the largest number of rainbow colored dildos. Like, that is what has replaced our auctoritas. And there's an interesting thing. Another thing that has been replaced here is the idea of nobility. Nobility and auctoritas are the important thing that culturally in the past we would have used as a point of orientation, because to be noble really literally meant nothing other than you were known. Your family was known. It had a reputation. It bred for certain results. It held certain offices. It was associated with certain territory. Noble comes from the Proto-Indo-European root no, meaning to know, right? And you can see all the different ways here with the terms that are available. You can see these knitting together. And no, the noble, the sense of auctoritas, has been replaced with the celebrity. What else do we have here? We had our instruments. Yeah, how much do I want to get into? Yes, disorientation. What causes disorientation? It's recognized as a medical condition. This disorientation that is the very thing that people seem endlessly to be interested in forcing us into. this idea of disorientation. Disorientation is an altered mental state. So that means all of us looking at the different facets of centralized and totalizing messaging that is pushed out through what I'm calling here the Bible. We suffer from a kind of disorientation, an altered mental state. A person who is disoriented may not know their location and identity, or even the time and date, often accompanied by other symptoms such as confusion, delirium, delusions, agitation, hallucinations, and this is my favorite one, just wandering around. They're disoriented. Now, this is something that is medically recognized as being pathological, harmful, or a result of a pathology, a concomitant, a symptoma. And yet this is what these folks are aiming to do in their rich varieties. They're aiming to create this sense of disorientation. Now, I'm just using this picture for the hell of it because I've always just wanted to share it on stream. I was very, very in love with a woman at one point, and I went to this maze in Barcelona. It happened to be raining, but it ended up being perfect because that meant no one came to the maze. So it was completely empty. And I believe, I'll have to check again, but if I remember correctly, that statue at the center is of Eros. And with a dying relationship there, it was interesting to see the labyrinth and the statue at the center, to be deeply in love and to know that it was all going to be destroyed, and to see the labyrinth before you of that circumstance that you're trying to deal with. And I love the way that the trees have an almost, in the background, have an almost purple cast, which gives it that purple and green look. Only those who have some experience with psychedelia will know what that signals. Anyway, what else did I have in here? Yeah, I picked this out in the past as being something that was likely to be trouble. Where was it here? Was this it? No, that's about orientation in general. Let me get over here. What was it? Which one was it here? No, yes, that's it. Back in March of 2016, I saw some of this coming because I had basically at that point just said, look, Trump's going to win. And I pointed out here, you can see in the last paragraph, let me see if I can make it any bigger. Remember the collective identity I touched upon above? If, as the Trump is racist meme gathers steam, his supporters will be able to treat it all as a tempest in a teacup. The greater the fury of the attack, the more it will support Trump's position that he's being misrepresented. The internal dialogue among his supporters will go something like this. I support him and I'm not a racist, so how could he be? The media are just liars. You got to remember, this was the very beginning of when they first said Trump's a Nazi and, you know, they're not sending their best. This was way early on. But I noticed that this opens the door to a rewriting of history because the news media are the primary channels through which shared understanding of national events is established. And because Trump supporters will no longer view the accepted reporting of events and circumstances as reliable, they'll be able to fashion new narratives to account not only for what's going on, but also for what happened in the past. This is no small thing. Now, obviously, this is from 5-6 years ago. This is a long time back. It might be more at this point. Good God, 16? Yeah, it's probably 5-ish years, 5 or 6. Yeah. And since that time, we've gone way past this to where they're attacking everyone, not just one side or the other, in order to do their Rwandan radio station thing. And here's this aspect of, where is it under? Is it under memory? What did I put this under? Yes. Where did I put it? There we go. This is one I used to use in presentations with clients. And what's important here, and this is going to touch on something we're coming up on in just a moment or a few minutes. This is how we navigate. And it's a conjunction of the past, the present, and the future. So our remembered and imagined experiences are what shape our interpretation of our current experiences. And our current experiences cause us to revise our remembered experiences and to anticipate in varying ways our imagined experiences. But what we're seeing is an attack on all three of these aspects in terms of disorientation. So the past has been utterly revised. And I was kind of touching on that with that business I just showed with Trump, where, you know, you have the idea in the past that you would have a whole block of the population saying, wait a minute, they're lying about Trump. That means maybe I can't trust the media. And then the whole thing with the media is it's like the short-term storage for what will become history. First, it gets reported in the media. If enough people do it and the narrative gets hammered in, then that will get carried over as the accepted version of events, and that's how everything will go from there. But what we have now is a situation where the past is being revised, where the present is being revised before our very eyes. I mean, it's literally a situation where they're telling you don't trust your lying eyes, and the future, in particular, imagined experience, has it. I'm beginning to think of it as being the most significant out of these three. You would think the past was most important, but we can reinterpret it, we can re-explain it, or hell, we can just repress and forget it. The present, we've all seen the ways in which we can look at what's going on in front of us and not see it, or many people will not see it, and you can like hold it up to their face and they'll still be like, what? And you'll be like, no, do you not see that this is going on? And they'll be, what? Stop, you're bothering me, you're crazy, that's not happening. I'm like, you can see the stiletto being plunged repeatedly into your bowels. Do you not? No, that's someone patting me on the back, right? Anyway, that's a bad metaphor. But the point is, the past, the present, and the future seemingly interrelate. And I'm going to come back to this because I'm jumping a little bit ahead. But while I have it on my mind, I have to cross-reference that image with another one for you guys. Hang on, let me pull it up over here. Just hang on, I've got to do it through here. I just realized, and I didn't prepare for this. I should have. Let me just pull this over here and do a search. It's Titian. Titian Allegory of Time. Where is it? Oh, they call it Allegory of Prudence. Here, I'll pull one of these up. Which one am I in now? Is this me? Yeah, let's pull it over here. All right. What you see here is Titian's Allegory of Prudence. Let's just make it bigger so you can see more of it. This is the young man, the old man, and the man in his middle age with his powers, right? And you see beneath, you see the image of a dog, a lion, and a wolf. And I've talked about this in the past. These are the three faces of time from a medieval tradition. And so what you have is the wolf that drags away its memories, which is like the past. And your memories disappear and they're lost, eventually devoured by the wolf of the past, so to speak. And that applies most directly to the old man, obviously, who has most of his life behind him and is looking backwards. You have the man in the present, and the present is construed like the lion, violent and sudden. And he's also looking at you straight on because that's the now, right? And you can be overwhelmed by the violence and the suddenness of the various things that affect you. And then you have the young man, and he's with the dog. And the dog in this medieval tradition of the three faces of time, which are also the three faces of prudence. And if I really wanted to get into it, I could talk about how all of this is reflected in Prudence's mirror, and also how beneath the wolf, lion, and dog's heads, you would see a body that was the serpent of time. But we don't have time to get into all of that. I just want to talk about past, present, and future and the idea of disorientation. So I wanted to emphasize the importance of the future as being one of the ways in which the manipulation is most effectively deployed. Well, look at the animal that goes under the young man who has most of his life before him. And what does time offer him? You know, the guy in the present, with the present being violent and sudden like a lion roaring in your face and you just discombobulating you. You have no way to react. It's so immediate, literally immediate, that it overwhelms everything. Or the man who has nothing left in his life and the wolf is dragging away his memories because he's old. The young man, he has before him the dog, which symbolizes the future. And the future, as I saw it put in one medieval manuscript, is constantly beguiling its master with false hopes. And as I said, by getting into this, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I want to talk about the future in a minute. And that is the idea of beguiling you with false hopes, holding out the promise of something that will never happen. And you see that it's aligned with the young, who have the majority of their life before them. So not only is it the most destructive in the falsehood, the beguiling false hopes that it offers, but at the same time, it's also having the most effect because the young man is the one with most of their life before him. And all of this just seems like cute. What are you talking about here, Oliver? But when you just think about a utopian, oh, hell, I'm just going ahead and doing it. I'm going to jump around this other thing I wanted to say just to ride this already. Utopians themselves have almost been ensorcelled, really, by the idea of the future. I mean, what else really is it? Let me just come back here and come up on screen. Can I come back up here? How do I remove this? Okay, I can remove. Okay, I took that down. There we go. Utopians themselves are most ensorcelled by the thing about which there's the least certainty. And the fact that the future has the least certainty to it, that it quote unquote could be anything, it is the thing that is most effective in terms of inculcating disorientation. I know it seems crazy because it's the thing that's not yet real, but insofar as it is not yet real, it holds out the most promise. And we can talk about poisoning our present, and we can talk about poisoning our past because we're watching it happen around us. But perhaps the most important thing that's been done is the poisoning of our future. And as they push it back, I've talked about this in previous clips, as they push back their poisoning to earlier and earlier age cohorts, they're more and more poisoning our future, which is something that we have to bear in mind. And we have a disorientation as related to our future. You know, I often joke about the future tense. Like people who follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen, I very often do this basic formulaic tweet. Somebody will post something. Usually it's a right winger. I've been talking about this recently, like the left-wing forces of progress, scumbag, nihilistic, culture-destroying, rainbow dildo-wielding fucksticks. They get more cover. They get more defense from their supposed detractors than anyone else. And it's primarily because of the present tense, the future tense. Whenever they're in the midst of doing something awful, some quote unquote conservative or right wing person will come in and say, if we don't fight back against this soon, we will be in a bad situation. And so my formulaic tweet is I'll take will be and put it in quotes. And then I put up the laughing, crying face, where your tears of laughter, because they constantly construe it as though it's the future tense. They attack us in the realm of the future tense. I mean, lots of people who are watching this probably are saying, what the fuck are you talking about, Oliver? But some few of you will have watched my channel enough to notice that I'm constantly talking about the ways that they use unrestricted warfare to attack the imagination itself, to attack our visions, to attack the imaginal, in the sense that Henri Corbin talked about it, and all a variety of mystics from further east talked about it. The important thing to understand is that the whole model of warfare that has to do with the police state and kinetic warfare and physical violence and the rest, that's all like third string defense. That's all up on shelves for later. They don't even need it anymore. If they attack your soul, they talk about like winning the hearts and minds. That was like a way back long ago iteration of this that has since been more perfectly weaponized. It's the idea of attacking their imagination and attacking their future, attacking the imagery within their souls in such a fashion that there's never any need for recourse to the physical or kinetic warfare or the impositions of a totalitarian state in that respect. They simply don't need it. And so the idea of the future being the place where they've trained their guns and created the most disorientation it's really important. So like, I'll just give you a couple of these because otherwise I'm going to get way, way too far into it. What do we have here? I'll cover this one. I don't have time to go into the whole thing about pattern recognition, white spider, the completion function, paranoia, metanoia. Yeah, I got to skip that. God, I've got like 4 pages of this shit left. I'm going to have to skip a lot of it, people, because I'm going to put you all to sleep. But let's just stay on this idea of the future for a second. And then I'll come back to tap one last thing about my upcoming book. That's how we'll do it. And then I'll take questions. Okay. I told you all this would be winding. So, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. So the future and attacking the future. What do we have there? Well, there are a number of different ways that you can do things. You can put off the desire or the need, right? If I'm constantly promising things to people and it never happens, then it's going to be like the boy who cried wolf. They're not going to listen to me anymore. There will be a price to pay for having made predictions about the future that don't happen. But if you can fucking gaslight them and bullshit them about the present and the future, most specifically the future, then you can defer that forever, which we see leftists constantly doing. And it's not just so much that they want to, that they're, how do I put this? There are a bunch of things that work for them in that respect. Not only can they defer being judged for their inaccurate predictions, but they can also push it further and further out and make it more and more bright and shining and utopian and more divorced from current reality. And so whatever crap you're doing today is justified based on the idea that there will be heavenly hosannas, will be the bright and shining city on the hill. There'll be the heavenly Jerusalem, the apotheosis. We'll all get carried up in the great rapture someday in the future. So it doesn't matter that I'm bayoneting my my fellow countrymen here or whatever, right? But there's also the idea of holding out the idea of some future possibility that's negative in such exaggerated fashion that it makes the present look like something that isn't as bad as it is. So, I just want to come back to this diagram for a minute. This is very, I get what I'm telling you guys is all over the place because these are new things that I'm chewing on, but there are people who are perfectly sophisticated enough amongst my listeners to like take pieces of this reflection and use it yourselves, or to use it themselves. There are also people with other channels, like interpretive stuff. Blackpilled is great with esoteric hermeneutics, interpretation of allegory with films and the rest, right? American Krogan showed his chops with looking at a video game from this perspective. Morgoth is certainly capable of taking things apart in this fashion. So for people like that who already sort of have their head on the wavelength of saying, well, what areas can be weaponized? How is this meta discourse subverted in various ways? Like some of you are going to be able to follow what I'm talking about. And I invite you all to take it away and use it because we have to understand this. But let me just pull this screen up again. There is, it's important to understand that whether they're fully conscious of it or not, whether or not they've done it in specifically this way, you have people who have essentially sat down around a table and said, well, how are we going to attack the past? And how does attacking the past further our aims now? They say, how do we attack the present? How does that affect us now and our prospects? How do we attack the future? And those are all interesting things in and of themselves. But what if you consider all three of them at once? What do we get that's a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts if we're talking about attacking the past, the present, and the future simultaneously with three different sort of actions? What do we get out of that that's more than we could have gotten out of attacking just one or the other of them independently, right? The future is one that I want to look at now, the way in which they attack our future. Of course, they quite literally attack our future in the sense that they're destroying our future prospects, right? We're not being replaced no matter what. I want you all to understand that I absolutely do not endorse that idea. We are not being replaced, and there is no such thing as anti-whiteism. So there's that very literal and mechanical way in which they're attacking our future, but they're attacking our concept of the future and weaponizing our conception of the future, which I just showed you with Titian and the idea of the dog beguiling the master. With false hopes. And they're doing it in a variety of ways. I've covered a couple of them. I'm just going to mention one last one. And I think it affected me in large part I'm like, oh, we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet, even though I'm on Twitter making fun of people for using the future tense in tweets. I myself am thinking it's not quite there yet. Now I'm just increasingly, Laocoon of Troy, or Laocoon of Troy, posted some great stuff about his thoughts regarding how long the Long March through the institutions has been happening. And, he posted something basically saying that this is not about to be a coup. This is just a mopping up operation. And I'm all like, he's probably fucking right. Right. It's already happened. I'm increasingly of the opinion that the collapse has already occurred. But because of the way the future tense and our conception of the future has been weaponized, I myself have been sucked into this idea that it is still yet to happen. So let me give you an example of that. Again, this is an example of one of the ways that past, present, and future can be attacked. In this case, the example is the future. Look at like your apocalyptic films, your zombie TV shows, your plague shows. We've been inundated with apocalyptic films, post-apocalyptic films, Malthusian collapse scenarios, zombie movies, plague movies, and it's always in the putative future tense. Look what that does. What if the apocalypse movies suffer from the same kind of optimistic blindness that we've already seen play out in the tweets that I mocked, right? Where I'm like, somebody will post something, they'll be like, if we don't do something soon, our country's going to be screwed. And I'm like, soon in quotes. And I put the little laugh face, right? Sure, soon. That shit has already happened, D'Artagnan. What if the constant use of the future tense in these television programs masks our actual circumstances as well as the cause in fact of their appeal? So by that I mean the collapse has already happened, but if you inundate people with plague scenarios, Malthusian collapse scenarios, zombie scenarios, and the rest, then that is the new idea of the future collapse. Obviously, that hasn't happened. We dodged that bullet. We're not there yet. I mean, we don't have the living dead prowling around the streets with like rotten bits of themselves falling off and going, "How, how." So we must not have had a collapse. We don't have like some dude in a plague suit with shit, or up until 18 months ago, 20 months ago, we didn't have it. We don't have somebody wandering the streets with like breathing apparatus and Tyvek and shit taped off or mop suits in the military and the rest, right? Can't be that bad, right? But by any standards, look around us in the streets. Look what's going on with, we just had a black school shooter who shot up 4 or 5 people. And he just got let go within like 24 hours with a $75,000 bail, and they're not even calling him a school shooter. People literally aren't going to jail, and when they do, they get let out immediately. They never go to prison. You've got the FBI going after angry parents who had, wrote a strongly worded letter to the school board. Now the FBI's got to look into it. You've got people across the world being locked down because of a pandemic, right? We're fucked. But look at the way in which, to come back to my point, the collapse has already happened. But look at the way in which, to come back to my point, we have the weaponization of our conceptions of the future being used as a tool to apply leverage to our present. And they're doing, this is leaving aside the way in which they're already doing it with the past. I'm just looking at the way they've attacked our conceptions of the future in order to affect things in the present. To make this really effective, you'd have to look at how they've attacked the past, how they've attacked the present, how they've attacked the future, and how, taken as a whole, all these things also yield a whole different set of considerations that are greater than the sum of its parts. But right now, I'm just looking at the present. By constantly inundating everybody with plague scenarios, Malthusian collapse scenarios, zombies, and all the rest, like I've talked about, they've given us the feeling that we're not there yet, and therefore the collapse hasn't happened. But it has. Let's just take a little peek. What's going on? We got an arms race that's fully underway globally, right? You got this talking about, nuclear powered submarines in Australia. You've got the Chinese dropping 2 or 3 new ships for their blue water navy into the water every year. moving as quickly as they can. You've got, the Kinzhal hypersonic missile that the Russians have developed. The Chinese at least want us to believe they have one. We're working on one. We go much further with that. Many countries are no longer defending their borders. We've also seen unprecedented air travel restrictions, or at least unprecedented in their scale. By the end of November, there are going to be a lot of countries you can't fly into or out of without vaccinations. We've seen enormous increases in the scale, scope, and granularity of surveillance and its integration in more broad systems of control. Metro areas, police don't respond to calls. If it's just your grandmother getting punched in the face and having her purse seized and the guy goes running off, they're literally not going to come. And in many cases, even if they do come, this has been the case for years, it's going to be a while. They sign report. They write up reports later for the most part. That's the main job of the police. They can't do anything before crimes have occurred. Therefore, they show up after the fact. But now we're looking increasingly at a situation where they don't even show up after the fact. And you can have someone who went into a school and shot up 4 or 5 people and killed at least one of them, and he's out on $75,000 bond or bail or whatever it is within 24 hours. Elections have been fully fortified. Self-defense will, in most cases, get you prosecuted. Definitely if you're a white dealing with a non-white. State, local, and federal governments are increasingly compromised as one moves from local to national. That meaning that the smaller the scale of the government apparatus, say it's just a municipality, it's less likely to be compromised, though many of them, hell, even most of them are. But going all the way up to the federal level, as you keep getting up, and then once you get to the transnational, let's say once you get to the multinational, international, and transnational levels, they're uniformly and universally compromised, utterly. So transnational organizations are twice as corrupt and complicit. All channels of communication have been turned to the purposes of subversions, as I've belabored at some length in our discussion thus far. Most fucking scientific data, at least as applied to things like certain medical issues, at least as is applied to the climate, at least as is applied to biology of race or biology of sex. It's utterly vitiated, if not weaponized as well. And in any case, it's applied in a way that is so biased as to be corrupt and malicious. Medical care is undergoing international spasms of corruption, of malfeasance, of misfeasance. It's gobsmacking, shocking, staggering, the scale of it and the amount of money they're carrying away. Your currency has been utterly debased, which means you're being robbed out of your pockets constantly. States are directly and indirectly forcing involuntary medical procedures. Members of one political persuasion are discouraged from protests and jails. Members of the other are encouraged to protest. And in most cases, they go uncharged, even when they break the law. Don't even get me started on all the various climate scams and hoaxes and all the corruptions and lies associated with this, as well as the frenzied arrogation of power in excess of all authority. So I just wanted to give you that list because that's the present. But through the ability to deploy the Bible, meaning the one messaging that, despite the various instruments that it might come through, this thing that seems to be coming from various places, that seems to be disparate and diverse, and yet it all goes back to the same fucking kitchen, like the Indian restaurants in New York. They have the ability to attack our future. So all you need is enough TV programs about, Malthusian collapse, plague, and zombies, and you'll look at that whole list of things that I just covered, and you'll be like, well, at least we're not there yet. Total collapse hasn't happened yet. And to some extent, even I've been there. Everything is about the future tense. Utopianism itself, of course, as I said, and for the normie, you know, always thinking about what can be done in the future, including me. Like, I'm weak, we can come back. There are things that we can do, right? But what are the broader implications of this whole theme of the future? What are the broader implications of this idea of the future as a target that all of the subversive weapons of the enemy have been pointed at? So yeah, now we're at like 1:30. I want to leave at least a half hour to answer questions on this. I've got so much more that I didn't cover because I'm all over the place. Like, I wanted to talk about this idea of false flags that aren't even attacks. They're false flags that are false attacks. This is another aspect of the total control of the messaging. It allows you, you know, you don't even need to have, you know, no matter what hit it, we don't have to go into that, but whatever it was that caused the World Trade Center buildings to fall, you don't even need that anymore. All you have to do is have the simulacrum of an attack and then amplify it through this control of the Bible. I really like this idea of the Bible. It is the one story. It is the one message. We have to stop thinking of these as different channels. We have to stop thinking of these things as being different voices. It's all one thing. This is the Bible. The Black Mirror is the Bible. No offense to Christians. The only Christians I'm interested in, at any rate, are entirely sophisticated enough to know that I know the limits of my metaphor, and I'm not referring to their sacred scripture. Anyway, we should very much understand and talk about, and if you don't like the Bible, find another fucking name for it, but we must give a name to the demon. Only when you give a name to the demon do you have control over it. And the uniformity of the voice now, which you can see when you hear the Build Back Better, or you remember from like 2019 and stuff, where there's clips and you have the newscasters who appear in little postage stamp type frames within the main frame, and they're all repeating the same expression. It's one message. It's one voice. My name is Legion, but I speak with one mouth, and it is the Bible. This accepted text with all its risible bullshit. You know, white men are violent, shallow, bigoted, insecure, and ridiculous. Generally speaking, sharing your feelings is always the best course of action. Women can fight at least as well as men. Minorities, due to their deep lived experiences, are uniquely qualified to give advice to whites. You know, the world will doubtless be better with a woman in charge. It's one message. It's one story. And we must give it one name in order to understand that all of these things have been knit together to speak with a forked tongue. And we should also look at this idea of the future tense itself as a target of manipulations. But again, I want to emphasize that even better still will be to look at the way the past is attacked, the way the present is attacked, the way the future is attacked, and what each of those things yields, but more importantly, what taken as a whole greater than the sum of its parts, they yield in aggregate as an overarching strategy. And then the last thing that I was mentioning is this idea of the false flag. That's not just a flag that's false. You know, they say false flag attack. We should start saying false flag, false attack, because their control of the Bible means that they can amplify a nothingness into a somethingness. So, you know, we were dealing with cyber attacks. You know, Klaus Schwab predicted it. The World Economic Forum said it's going to be an issue. We deal with increasing cyber attacks. And even the attack didn't really happen. And yet it will be discussed as though it did and will be used as the pretext for the next step. That's the kind of disorientation, to bring it all back together. It's the disorientation we face when flying blind with a set of instruments that we have no control over. And again, they're not just instruments that are going wrong here and there or a random way. They're instruments that have all been subverted, and all been subverted in such fashion that each of their readings in isolation is brought together in aggregate and there to yield a whole greater than the sum of its parts in terms of how subversive and destructive it is. I've done better clips in the past in terms of keeping my shit together. And there's a whole thing. Yeah, that's the last thing. I'm just going to say it very quickly, and then we're going to take questions. So now I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys, ask questions related to this. I know many of you are going to want to ask about other things, but I hate it when a title does not correspond to what I see in the clip. So try to keep the questions focused on this subject. Go ahead and start asking them. Put an @semiagog at the beginning, and I will respond to them. But while I'm waiting for a few of those to come through, I am just going to cover this last little point that I wanted to talk about very, very quickly. Those can go there. These ones can go here, because I was going to pull these out and talk about them, but I am not going to have... Scheiße! Stuk Scheiße! Hang on a second. Just drop something. It's one of the things that I hope to deal with my work currently on my book about the semiotics of nationalism. Because ultimately, if you go back to quite a bit of postmodernism comes out of linguistics. And structuralism all comes out of linguistics, and all that shit goes back to Ferdinand de Saussure. And his idea is that there is an arbitrary relationship between the signifier and signified. And that means, you know, I talk about it many, many, many times. So many of you are going to be like, shut up, Oliver. I've heard this a million times. You're going to say arbor in Latin for tree, and you're going to say ach in Turkish for tree, and you're going to say tree in English for tree. And the fact is that all those words have no relationship to trees themselves. They're all arbitrary. Therefore, our communication conventions are arbitrary, because we just pick a name by convention. We're going to call this a cigarette, but the Turks are going to call it cigara, right? I don't know. Mexicans will say cigarrillo. I don't know. But the point is the designation is arbitrary. And linguists, postmodernists, structuralists have accepted the idea that all designations are arbitrary, which means they've opened up the gates for all of this bullshit that I've been talking about in the context of disorientation. What I hope to do with my book on the semiotics of nationalism is to underscore that deeper than spoken language with its arbitrariness is a non-arbitrary, motivated set of communication conventions that can be relied upon, that aren't a tabula rasa, that cannot be rewritten by slobbering utopians at will. And at the core of that notion is the idea that writing, in a non-arbitrary sense, with no necessary relationship to spoken language, precedes speech. Animals write. So going back to that notion that I sort of had appear for me, and I just wrote it down. I'm going to put a little box around it too, so I don't forget it. Tradition, or anyway, the only tradition that I'm interested in is culture that is rooted in biology. And by asserting that writing, which is non-arbitrary, by asserting that that precedes speech rather than the other way around, then I delve deep below. What is this? This is where I'm going to do this thing where I look up Shakespeare, because I can't remember the quote properly. And in the course of it, I may well find that I have misremembered it, and also see that they've got a bad version of it. Where is the phrase? Because I remember delve deep. Oh my God. Yes. These letters sealed, and my 2 schoolfellows, whom I will trust as I will adders fanged. They bear the mandate. They must sweep my way and marshal me to knavery. Let it work. For 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard, and shall go hard. But I will delve 1 yard below their minds and blow them at the moon. Oh, 'tis most sweet when in one line 2 crafts directly meet. That's what I was looking for. I will delve 1 yard below their minds and blow them at the fucking moon by asserting that writing precedes speech, and that writing, unlike speech, has no necessary arbitrariness. I will connect the tradition to its biological roots and restore orientation by smashing their assumed universal arbitrariness, which ties into the tabula rasa and all the rest. But now I've had too much of my apple juice and I'm about to have my last cigarette. I've teased with that. That's a book that is in development. And so the most perspicacious and perceptive among you, if you're interested in this topic, can get in touch with me privately about it. But there will be more to come in this respect in future. And now, I will take questions. So let me see here what we have from people. We've got 20 minutes left or so, unless this is really exciting, in which case I'll go longer. Dagbreaker says, Nayar Letotep. Scrolling down here, let's see. False flag. Rick Farwell says, Semigog, this false flag, does it explain January 6th and the use of it by the left? Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's fucking false flag, man. Everybody here knows what that means. I'm just pointing out that back when I brought it up, I was just pointing out that is another way in which we are splintered and the tensions are increased and the ability to establish consensus is eroded. And that consensus, in turn, is one of the ways in which we socially and culturally orient. So, yeah, I'm not going to crack all that back open again. But, yeah, January 6th is another example of a false flag. But, of course, when I mentioned false flag, I was talking about a whole group of other things that are done at the same time and that, again, in themselves yield a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Next one from Nullus. Hello, sir. Whenever there's a Hungarian in the house, I want to say Hoj, Moj, weird Oj sounds. I wish I could remember some proper Hungarian. I'll go sing that lullaby from the English Patient to myself. Marta Sebastian Musikas. Perhaps the instruments work fine, but we've placed blind trust in an unreliable navigator. Yes, but if I'm talking about myself, I am the navigator using the instruments, and I know I'm unreliable. But what's most important here is that we're all using these tools. When I talk about the need to have recourse to mediated instrumentation, I'm talking about the internet. I'm talking about the texts that appear on our screens, the news that makes it through to us, the fact checkers, that people have recourse to, or the peer-reviewed papers that we can search. And the fact that all of it is increasingly being called into question. So yes, it might be that the people that we turn to for the informed opinion so that we don't have to think about it, yes, they've been compromised too. But I mean, we're way past that, man. We're to the point where each one of us on our own, like all the crazy bitches that I deal with, and I'm talking in the positive sense of crazy bitches, all the people I know, all the people... I often turn to this guy, El Vaquero 555, who's somewhere in the Southwest. And he's totally on his own, but he digs for shit on his own. He's on his own. But I know that he looks into certain subjects. So when he mentions something that I know is in an area that he focuses on all the time, I'll pay a little bit of attention. Because there are just certain people out there who are looking at stuff. And that's our best thing for experts at this point, because none of the experts can be trusted. So I bring that up because it's not so much that there's one party that we would have turned to who would be an authority on a given thing, though of course there is that. I talked about auctoritas and it being replaced with celebrity. It's more that each and every one of us who have the gumption, who have the inclination, and who have the wits to be able to attempt to interpret it all for ourselves, because we're using the mediated system, we're dealing with a set of instruments that have been vitiated or subverted or otherwise unreliable. But welcome always to Nullus. I've appeared on his channel too. You should go check him out, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Does a lot with poetry, does stuff with White Art Collective and other things. Stand-up guy. John Ski says, regarding past, present, and the future, when a person dies, does time still exist for that person? Well, I can't remember, except in little flashes and bits, anything that isn't from my memories in this day and time. So I cannot answer you as an authority there. And that's a pretty sneaky way to get around the scope of this current discussion, Mr. Ski. But the best answer I could give you is one that I've heard from others. And that is, there is a difference between time and duration. And that time with a capital T has much more to do with things that we would call eternity. And so from that perspective, when a person dies, time with a capital, usually only then does time with a capital T become a thing that has bearing, which is very different from duration, which is the seemingly linear passage of moments. But that was sneaky, Mr. Ski. You stepped outside the scope of this discussion. I only answered because it was fairly cleverly done. Okay, Bertrap de Neveu. Semiagog, do you think America is too young to have an identity regardless of what party is in office? Like Russia, for instance, after the collapse of communism? God, my French accent is fucking bad. Never mind. Like Russia, do you think America is too young to have an identity regardless of what party is in office? Like Russia, for instance, after the collapse of communism? No, because the roots of the American identity go back prior even to our documents that established our conventions. So, you have a fundamental idea of the United States as religious freedom. The earliest settlers from England here, or let's say Britain here, had a fundamental idea of being able to escape to a place in which religious freedom would be permitted, and they would be able to speak their minds. So that understanding of this place and those features predates even the conventions that form the official, beginning of the American experiment as a state or a set of states. So I don't think it's too young at all. But by the same token, it seems increasingly that we're not going to end up being all that old either. It keeps going this way. King Salmonfish in the house. Hello, sir. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the kind support of the channel. Says, if the instruments are pseudo-randomly sabotaged, couldn't you determine that your brother has attacked you and that the steering is also sabotaged and the door is locked? They are like us. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The important thing, though, is to understand that it's not just that the instruments are unreliable. It's like one thing when a person gives you an answer as though they know, but they don't know. So think of one instrument as like that, and say you've got 5 instruments on the instrument panel, and you can think, oh, somebody who doesn't really know is pretending like they do. It's random, or it's bullshit, or it's an educated guess, but it's not reliable. That's a very different thing. Think about it like this. You were talking to a person and they just guessed when they didn't really know. Well, what happens when you ask 5 people which way you're supposed to go in order to stay safe and get where you're going because it's critically important? And all 5 of those people had arranged beforehand in a closed room to lie to you in a certain way to get a very specific thing to happen. That's the kind of vitiation of the instrumentation that we use to orient that I refer to. All right. And do we have any? What just happened here? Charlemagne just said that's not entirely the story. Semiagog, lol. First off, Charlemagne, welcome as always, sir. Fine gentleman, but I have no idea what you're talking about. It must have been further back. What did I miss? What are you talking about, Charlemagne? What you talking about, Willis? Tell me what the hell you're talking about. I don't have context for that. Fiend J, another fine gentleman whom I have just learned is a dancer. No, who is a dancer? He's a dancer. Not just ballroom either, though ballroom is based. Fucking Fiend J is a dancer. Stylish. Dancers, best people. Just to let you know, you can be as cool as it gets. If you don't know how to dance, I'm always gonna think a little bit less of you. I'm always gonna look a little bit down my nose at you. I'm just gonna tell you honestly. Because that shit is the bomb. Men should dance. It makes them better fighters anyway. Much better lovers, gives them grace, dexterity, timing, anticipation of rhythm. Fiend J says utopianism in 2 words: always arriving. Right, which means never here. Indeed. So has Charlemagne come back through? Did he explain this? Where'd you go? Where'd you go, boy? I kiss your ass, Canal and Royal, if you can explain that to me, brah. I don't know what you're talking about, shit. Dagbreaker says, Semigog, I like your focus on the future. Do you think trying to rescue the past should not be an option anymore? I like to consider visualizing the first time boarding a ship towards a new world. Yes, but the issue is the issue again is considering all these things as one. It's less about the idea of the past or the idea of the future and the present. It's more about looking at what you can do by attacking all of them at once. That's the thing. In the sense of analysis, it is very useful to take independent elements and to try to understand them, but you're constantly lost. There's an old Fritz Lieber story. It's one of the last ones he wrote about Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and it's about the curse of the smalls and the curse of the stars. And one of them, I can't remember if it was Fafhrd or Mouser, which had which, but the curse of the smalls was constantly be looking into the gutter at tiny little things as he got older. Some sorcerers got pissed and basically afflicted them with an old man's afflictions. And one was the curse of the smalls, one was the curse of the stars. And the curse of the smalls was always to look at the more specific, more granular things. The curse of the stars was to look up at the sky and always make it seem grander and bigger, with no immediate way to contextualize it in terms of your own specific issues. And so I think it's less about, we should avoid the curse of the smalls and invoke at times the curse of the stars, looking for greater wholes, because WHOLES, because we're faced with the idea of these independent things, and if we're just talking about what they do to the future or what they do to the past, then we've got like 1/10 of what they're actually up to. It's like we've only identified the part of the dildo that still remains outside of our asses. Okay, it looks like, did Charlemagne answer here? Did he? Oh, yes. Oh, he's talking, I think, about American history. What does he say? The religious Americans who came over from England were less looking for religious freedom so much as they were politely asked to go away far, like to the other side of the Atlantic. Yes, that is fair. Nevertheless, you and I would certainly agree, I would imagine, that has since become one of the founding facets of the story of America, and it does predate our conventional documents. Now, we can argue about to what extent it's true, or to what extent it was used to mask some other issue, like you're talking about here. They're just like, get the fuck out of here, you crazy Anabaptist religious freak, right? But Charlemagne's also speaking as a Catholic, so he's got no interest in these freakish Protestants. By the way, go check out Charlemagne's channel, and he's also doing a lot of stuff with Settler's Lament, who I'm always poking and prodding at. But Settler's Lament is one of the funniest channels out there, and his Twitter account is funny as hell. And I have to say, I still have no idea what Settler's Lament's actual positions are on anything. I just know that if anyone is going to resurrect the or bring back the auto de fe rituals, my money is on Settler's Lament. So I recommend his channel too, but definitely check out Charlemagne, who is one of the OG real peeps. So what do we have in our last few minutes here, peoples? Und what we have? Und what we have? Ooh, I get a kiss from Livia. Nice. I'm gonna have to go check her out later, guys. Sorry, just playing. Thank you. What is the next? King Salmonfish. Remove the metaphor. The conspirators believe most of the same things we do, and thus they can craft said lies and mechanisms. They must fear one man beyond comprehension. We hold the key, question mark. I don't understand fully what you're saying, so your mileage may vary with my response. Don't take it too seriously, but I would say the only thing I can respond to is the idea that they fear one man beyond comprehension. I doubt that. I mean, unless you're talking about a second coming, because if you've got a single person upon whom everyone's hopes rest, then it's the oldest solution in the book. Tim, my good friend Tim, always jokes about uh, Philip of Macedon being killed. He's always like, "Oh yeah, old Philip of Macedon. Yeah, that sucked for him. He got killed by a lone dagger nut, right? Like the lone gun nut who shoots someone down. It was just emergent behavior. It was just an accident. It was totally coincidence. Some wacky, crazy guy just appeared out of everywhere. Philip of Macedon got taken down by a lone dagger nut, right? Which probably means that Alexander's mom and the people who backed him decided they wanted to support Alexander instead. And so they found some freak to stick a dagger into Philip, and it was done. My point here being that if you have one central figure who acts as the sort of linchpin or the keystone for everyone, then these old school scammers of the scammers and players of the game, they know how to deal with that real easy. He could slip in the bathtub and hit his head. He can have a fucking, whoops, whoops. Or he can have just a weird car accident. Remember when that weird truck just hit Patton? Or a whole shitload of pornography of the youthful variety could be discovered upon his computer. There are many ways, King Salmon Fish, to deal with the central figure, but I will say that that it is. I did not entirely understand what you're saying there, so maybe I missed the point. Jackass says, Semigog, do you think a Malthusian collapses on the table? No. No, because I think some things are going to happen before that render it, that render all that moot. All right. Men Like Gods, hello, sir, says, with the degenerate protected class being the new saints of this modern day Bible, how do we return to morality? Ridicule and shame doesn't seem to work. We haven't even tried ridicule and shame yet. I'm going to go ahead and say this. The most important thing that I know of for the right wing is comedy. We need comedy. We must have comedy. I mean, think back to all the comedy shows that we used to watch that would make fun of Christians, that would make fun of traditionalists, that would make fun of traditional mores. Endless. They're all there. They're absolutely, and they're still funny. Like I was just watching AbFab, and it's like dumb in a lot of ways, but the way in which they just have a mother mocking and hating her own child, it's so inverted, it's so fucked up that in some ways it's still funny. They got away with doing that. If the right wing wants to be effective, I mean, other than pursuing their own thing in quiet and prudence, off on their own without asking to be hit in the head with a hammer, the most important thing that we can be doing is coming up with comedy and producing comedy. I want to do it. People who are actually funny, please call me. Please get in touch with me. Actually funny people. I want to get a group of people together to produce comedy. But how do I say this? Here's the problem. Here's the terrible problem. Most of the people who think they're funny aren't. I know in my own character and personality that I have a limited band of humor where I can actually pull it off, but I'm not like a good, I'm not a good producer of comedy. And the majority of the people on the right, and there aren't many, I mean, God, there's very, very few, they're not funny enough. No offense to them, but we need humor. We need ridicule as a weapon. We need comedy. And that's what we should all be focusing on. It's so important. It's so critical. Like everybody's, trying to, inform the world and help them to be red-pilled and learn about what's going on. The most critical thing is to produce comedy, especially at this point. And I'm not talking about something like Murdoch, which actually does have pretty funny moments. I'm talking about something a little bit more accessible, but still over the top, but a lot more funny. Because, gusts of laughter blow the cobwebs of tyrants away. I think I'm fucking up a paraphrase of Mark Twain there, but anyway. Und next. Oh, we're past 2 hours at this point, so I'm going to go for just long enough to finish my apple juice. If you guys want to stick with me, let me see here what else we have. Nullus Abnormocracy says European folk dance around the table. When? If I get out of this city and I get out into the woods and I have enough space, I will definitely invite a group of right-wing crazies down. There will be no discussion of bombs. There will be no shooting. There will be no guns. There will be none of that shit to like invite the FBI down to be nonsensical. I'm just going to invite people down to drink and talk and eat good food and make live music out on some mountainside around a roaring fire or whatever. I will definitely do that. And European folk dances, definitely. Don't trust a man who cannot dance. I cannot emphasize it enough. And Nullus has been sending me stuff of these Hungarians doing all this crazy kind of body slapping stuff and leg swinging. And oddly, I've seen Germans do some things like that as well. There's so many old forms of folk dance that we need to bring back. Because like I said, do not trust a motherfucker who can't dance. And encourage people around you who can sing. Encourage people around you who can produce live music. We can get to whether it's good or not later, but first, singers and dancers, we must have them. And comedy by Crom. All right, next. King Salmon Fish says, I will rephrase. They fear all men as tyrants do. Check. They have conceived a hyperweapon arsenal out of that fear. Okay. Anyone can utterly destroy them with a joke, a word, a rock in the hand. Well, I certainly do not endorse the using of a rock in the hand. We will not discuss the rock in the hand. But yes, I mean, you're basically going along the same road I am, which is that, jokes, a word, absolutely. But I think what you're talking about, I think if I understand you correctly, you're just talking about the idea that it's not so much that it is a specific single man. It is that one man alone, or circumstances right, could lead to their entire downfall. It's what I call the pebble of chance. The pebble of chance can unhorse them entire. And the form of that pebble of chance, the form that pebble of chance could take, could indeed be the simple accidental behavior of a single man. Yes. If I understand you, yes. Und what else did I miss here? Lowell says, for comedy, find Dave Allen on YouTube. Yes. Must be good comedy, though. I'm going to be evil as shit. You better be so certain that you really are funny as hell and unshakable in that righteous conviction. People who send me shit that they think is funny that isn't funny, I'm going to be evil. I'm sorry. I'm old now. I'm going to be evil. I'm going to be like, what are you, fucking crazy? That shit is not funny. Like, I need snot to come out of my nose, and I have to like when you're in school, it's happened to me in elementary school where somebody makes a joke and you're drinking milk and it comes out of your nose because you have to be that funny. Get in touch with me if you're that funny, because that's what's required. And I don't know. See, the problem is that the humor requires the irreverence. The irreverence requires the ability to step outside the framework of tradition and honoring that which is old and traditional. And just right-wingers don't have it as much. But it's all coming down. It comes down to how you frame the basis for the jokes. If you come up with the gambit or the context for the jokes that is really funny at the outset, then the other stuff just flows naturally. So like in the AbFab stuff, what actually made it funny, it's the simple idea that you've inverted the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and everything else flows from that. But it only gets halfway there. You can go the full distance and make it really funny. I just don't know how. Shalashashknya? Holy shit, that sounds Slavic as hell, or Georgian or something. Says, in my listening to Bronze Age Pervert, he espouses that as the form he espouses that as the foremost weapon, and yet the man is scoffed at in most circles of the right. I've still never, I think I've probably read 2 little short things of his at this point, so I don't know him well. But I will say this, he's definitely not a dumbass, quite the opposite. So I don't know why he's dismissed. I don't know him well, and I'm not on board with, from what little I know of it, with all his things, but why would anybody just dismiss him? He's not a, and there are large numbers of people who are who weigh in on the dumbass scale much more heavy. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with all that. All right, looks like I fell way behind. I'm gonna have to scoot forward here. Well, hell, I'm not in any rush. Until people really start to drop off and disappear, I can always get more stupid. It is Thursday night, and I already talked to the various institutional buyers about my house, and I'm waiting for them to get back to me with the second offer. Well, I'm not really sure about that offer. I think I need to have another $20,000 on the table for me to be willing to get rid of my house for that amount of money. But then I'm going to go away. I'm going away, and I'm going into the mountains. I will go into the mountains. Grom. Dagbreaker says, Semigog, when you talked about comedy, I completely agree. This got me to thinking about a type of Wayne's World phenomena, especially how YouTube can be set up like how they, being Gen X, were set up. Dagbreaker, nice guy, long-time channel follower, want to answer the question, but I don't really understand. So don't take it personally. I just, I'm not getting it. How being Gen X, yeah, I'm sorry, man. Rephrase it and I'll see what, well, now he says Wayne's World philosophy. And I never really watched Wayne's World. Try again, friend. Sorry that I can't answer it. I attempted to do so. Levity. That's a hill to picnic on. Check out all these people. I'm seeing a bunch of people from back in the day in here. Check it out. Y'all up in the house. Y'all just waiting for me to get drunk and make a fool out of myself. Not that I would get drunk from apple juice. And so what is next? Mosley's Trash says, give us your best dance move then, Semiguy. Okay, you guys want to see my I can show you. I was doing a Sevillanas practice. Okay, I got to warn you. This was done a long time ago. Or not, I'm sorry. It wasn't done a long time ago. It was done probably 3 months ago, maybe. But it had been a long time since I practiced this dance. So you guys actually want to see this? You want to see me practicing? This is me trying to get back into it. Okay. This is me old and like going, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to try to get back into this. So yeah, this is a practice, and this is at like 85% speed. So it could be fast. Where the fuck is it? Hang on. Where? Oh man, 3 monitors. I'm too old for this shit. Where? I'm sorry, I've got to close about 500 windows now. But I'll give you an example of dance. This is practice, and I'm out there. It is. Okay. Jesus Christ. All right. So yes, you want to see this? All right. This is practice. Again, it's just practice, and it's at 85% speed because I'm trying to get back into it after having left it alone for quite some time. All right. How do I show this? Do I share it here? Oh, how am I going to get the audio to play through? Hopefully it'll play through. Let me get my headphones here and make sure. All right. If y'all make fun of me, I'm going to cry. All right. Let's see here. Okay. I think this will work. It's not super high res. Maybe there's a higher resolution one. Is there? Fuck it. I'll be here all night if I'm trying to figure that out. So we're just going to do it like this. All right. Zed says, I'm licking your abs. Degenerate. No. I'm totally on board with AA about that. Okay, let me add this to the stream. No, I have to do it differently. Hang on, this is how I do it. I share the video. All right, so video file. Sorry. Desktop, yes. Sorry, 1 second, people. I just have to scroll down here to wherever the hell it is because it's from so far back. There it is. Okay. Is that it? Okay. Here we go. Be gentle now, y'all. It says this uses a unique codec that your browser doesn't support. What the? What? 3GP. Well, why did I save it as a 3GP? I don't remember saving anything. What is a 3GP anyway? Even my old one is showing 3GP. I don't know what 3GP. Hang on. I'm just going to change the extension on it to .movie. Sorry, people. I can make this happen. Hang on. This is a old person challenge. See if it still works. Yeah, I just called it .move and now it works. So, okay, let's see. Un moment. Un momento. Now we'll try. Now, share. Okay, you guys got to tell me instantly. Remember, there's a little delay from when I post it and you see it. Tell me instantly if you don't hear audio, and I'll try something else. But here it is. Let me find it. Okay, let's try this. It still says it. What the? Maybe I can find an old one. I can play an old one, but some of you will have seen it before. I was hoping to put something up that that you hadn't seen before. But here, fuck, man. I wanted to show you the Sevillanas, but I'm gonna have to show you the Bullerias instead. So sorry, it's not playing. It's saying that it's a 3GP. What the fuck is a 3GP anyway? I've never dealt with a 3GP format. Let me just try to see if I can make it QuickTime. Or let me just call it MP4. Hang on. Sometimes when you just rename the extension, you can get out of it. Okay, it still makes it look as though it's visible. Let me try that first. We'll try this. I can show you 2 of these if I get drunk enough. I mean, apple juiced enough. Share. Let's see if changing the extension this last time worked. There it is. Okay. Nope. All right. Sorry, guys. I tried, and I don't know what's going on with it. Like, literally, I have a couple videos on here that I did not put that extension on, and they have them on them. No, all right. Let me find the other one. You will get to see some dance. I'm just going to have to find an old one. Hang on. This will get more interesting in just a moment. I mean, if nothing else, you have an opportunity to make fun of me. Just a sec. All right. Yeah, we're finding it now. We're getting there, peoples. Yeah. Where's my MP? Oh, I got to sort this by kind. See, you get old and you haven't cleaned your computer in like 100 years. And what ends up happening is you have like 5 million things on your machine. All right. Is that a blurry? Oh, that's way old. I got tons of stuff I could show you, actually. This might be funny. Let me see if this works. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to get to the right spot on it. Hang on 1 second. Yeah, because I want to show you the high resolution one, actually. So, okay. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to take this onto the desktop. Hang on. It's just taking a minute to copy. Okay. Here, let's try this again. Thank you for your patience, peoples. Share. Video file. Let me sort it by name because there's just so much crap here. There we go. Let's see if this works. Oh, hey, it does. Cool. Let me just find out where it is. There we go. All right. You ready, peoples? Here we go. I got to go a little back because you got to hear the beat of it before it starts. Anyway, I just wanted to, how do I take this down? Oh, got to go down here. All right. So that was one. Sorry. Could you hear it? Did the audio come through? Oh, all right. Cool. Yeah, I have tons of other of these from flamenco. Let's see if there are any other good ones. I mean, there's ones of me doing stuff on my own, dancing with the girlies. What do we have here? You guys are all going to get bored if I do a bunch of flamenco stuff late at night. But that's one example. I'm going to fix that other one from when I was practicing Sevillanas earlier, because that was that's one I just did recently because I'm trying to get back into it, and it's a lot more cardio intensive. So anyway, there you go. I have a little bit of a drink left in me. We'll call it just a few more minutes. Let me look over here and see if we have any more questions at the end of the evening, and we will go. I got sucked into that by someone with the handle Mosley's Tash. That will go down in history. All right. Let me see here. Do we have any last questions? It looks like we do not. Well, then, what is... Ash says, I asked Crom what the secret of steel was. He said I wouldn't know until I knew the size of him. I guess it was metal. That sounds like a joke coming from a non-English speaker. Basic says we need to return back to monkey forget modern traditions and its human rights. I'm not sure what that means. I'm thinking maybe I'm not the only one drinking whiskey. Apple juice this evening. All right. So what else do we have here, ladies and gents? Do we have any last things, or is it time for me to go? I'm going to get out of here at midnight at the latest, which is a maximum of 10 minutes. 11D Levity says, do you say you have an Austin Spare painting? No, I have an Austin Spare drawing. Let me see if I can find it for you, and I'll share it with you peoples. I bought it from John Balance of Coil. It came from his personal collection. See if I can share this with you. I shared just to, yeah, because it doesn't have audio. Yes, I can. There we go. Which one? This one? Yes. This is my Austin Spare drawing. Let me see if I can share this. I'll come over here. Share my screen. God, you guys are getting a freebie tonight, man. I've just gone ahead and let my hair down. All right. This is my Austin Spare drawing. Whoops. Wait, it just went away. Come back. There we go. Boonk. Boonk. No, come on now, retard Oliver. There we go. This is the Austin Spare drawing that I own. It's in the other room, so I'm not going to go up and get it, but you can see it digitally here. Yes, that is a Spare drawing, and I own it. And I bought it from Jeff, or John Balance of Coil. And there you are. And now let me close the screen and come back to you. All right, what else do we have? Do I get hangovers from that iced tea? No, because I'm really only drinking like 2 or 3 of them at most. John Ski says, why is the left so much better at this cultural change than us? I don't know, but I think the gist of it is probably what I was talking about when I mentioned comedy earlier, which is the idea that they're willing to basically shit on or blow their nose at or go, right, or just laugh at anything. Whereas there are certain things that the quote unquote right, or at least certainly people who have respect for tradition or religion, there's certain domains that they won't go into in terms of mockery. And the idea of transgression is fundamental to the idea of humor, whether we want to admit it or not. And so it seems natural that those most likely to mock anything are going to be better at it than those who have certain reservations or areas that they're not going to go into in terms of what they will mock. Just a quick guess, but yeah. All right, anything else? What else do we have here? Nothing? Und nothing? King Salmonfish says, what if you simply place a pebble on the board yourself? Somebody might catch it in the net. Now he's just ripping off Tim-isms. Yeah, Ollie, I think he might catch it in the neck. Tim. Yep. A willful waste is a woeful want. This one goes out to Mr. Tim. I hope he is back with us and soon. He's been getting better. I've talked to him much more frequently privately, so I am hoping that he will be back for some discussions before too long. I mean, frankly, even though I'm older than most of you assholes, Tim's older than me, and I can... It's great when Tim's on, because then I feel young again. And also he has, you know, as an elder, he adds a certain perspective. We're coming up on it. Yeah, we got about 5 minutes left, people. Baggins NZ, great stream this one. Thank you, sir. One of your best. Sent an email. Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you. Dangerous. God, all these people from back in the day. Did you see the various mandates going anywhere? In other words, is the picnic still on? I was about to say that I'm not going to take that question. Does it? Because it does not fit with the title of this stream at the beginning. But after having showed the flamenco clip, I'm busted there. But I don't understand the question, so I'm saved. Nullus Abnormocracy says, random question. What are your thoughts on the dueling scars return? I think he is talking about the Hamburg dueling scars, where they get it on the cheeks from wearing the steel goggles, but they get the saber cuts. At this point, anything that makes us less pussies, I would sort of welcome. So yeah, I'm all for them. And there is a character, in fact, in there's Ms. Lang, a character who has Hamburg dueling scars in this book Vinculum, if you want to check it out. Because I like the idea of this dueling scars. Jawohl. Ja. Ja, sehr gut. Anything else? This is it, people. We got 5 minutes left. What do you got? Closing questions. Closing questions. I will have been going for almost 2.5 hours. Zedez, thank you, by the way, for coming in and helping out tonight. Thank you to all of the moderators, including Fiend J, John Ski, and everyone. God, I didn't see Mr. Ixme in the house. Oh, well. What else? Dagbreaker, yeah. Early morning here, Wayne's World, just two friends who want to make their friends smile by broadcasting through cable TV, end up taking on the cathedral. Comedy good. Oh, okay. I see. Yes, I didn't even understand the whole background of Wayne's World being a show or whatever. King Salmonfish says, can we take a second and just bask in the fact that we are winning like crazy? Yeah, we're just winning. I'm going to tell Trump I'm tired of winning. Yeah, I wish we were. And in some respects, we still are. I am not totally black-pilled. See, Fiend J said, post the Seviana's video on Twitter. I want to give you competition on it. Fiend J probably could, because he's got more than one area of dance that he has mastered. You know, I would post the Seviana's one on Twitter, Fiend J, but it is past their 2 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever the maximum size of their clip is, because Seviana's is in 4 parts. So I guess I could cut it up. I'll take a look. Yeah, I'll cut it so only the best parts show. Now you're making me all self-conscious. I'm going to have to practice beforehand because, you know, you have a bunch of dancing experience. And you're younger than I am. I'm all older now. You're younger. You're more frisky. You're more brisk. You're able. You're spry on your feet. There are all sorts of things you can do that I can't do. So, yeah, maybe I need to go record another one and make it even better. We'll see. But I will not entirely back down. And I'll definitely have a dance contest with anyone my age. I mean, except someone who's good. John Ski says, when did you start dancing? Turkey, Europe? No, I broke up with this chick and I was in a miserable state. I was like 29 And a friend of mine who is a flamenco invited me up to DC and said, come check out this show. And I had seen a number of flamenco performers from Spain perform live, but by going up and seeing the show and then hanging out with them afterwards, where I got to see the other side of it. Because what's on stage, yeah, it's interesting, but to me, it's boring. What's interesting to me is when I do it, not when I watch someone do it. And I got into that whole lifestyle for a while where you go after the show and you push on the restaurateur to keep the restaurant open, and he starts bringing out bottles of manzanilla because he wants to keep you around because it's so fun for everyone. And the guitarist goes and gets his guitar out of the car, and the singer starts singing, and they start playing knuckles on the table, and the owner locks the door of the place, and 3 hours later you're in there drinking and people are dancing and singing, and it's in private. That is the part that is mighty to me. And I saw that a bit when my friend invited me up, my good friend Gerard, who has been on this channel before. And we did some stuff about flamenco. That's another thing, man. I did a flamenco clip on here, and very few people came and checked it out because it's not in most people's interest area. So, you know, hell, that one clip of mine, which is it's in the last 4 months, I think it's got less than 1,000 views. So, you know, most people are not into to dancing. All right, this is it, people. We're coming up on the last 2 minutes. Fiend J is totally gonna have a dance off. Dance off with Fiend J. That would actually be awesome. We have to come up with right-wing comedy, and some of it could involve like dance offs. Oh, and a right-wing dating show. I know. I'm not going to name names, but I know a number of right-wing people who are looking for wives. And I think that it would be the most awesome thing ever to have a right-wing dating show with males who review a variety of women and then pick. And it'll be like the dating game or whatever back in the 70s or 80s, 70s, wasn't it? That was going on? Anyway, the only thing that I'm running into is a hiccup. The only thing I'm running into is a hiccup is that I think the women should have to pay. I think the women should have to pay to be on the show. I think like women have to pony up with like $20 and then they get to be considered. It seems most patriarchal and right to me that you have the male, he's selecting the women, like they're behind the screen and the guy's sitting on the table and he's like, well, contestant number 2, what do you think of the idea of spending most of your time in the kitchen, right? And then the 3 women could be sitting there behind the screen and they'll be like, well, I don't know, how will we answer? And they like hit the buzzer. Well, Johnny, if you were able to go out on a date on me, I'd show you that I'd make the best grape leaves wrapped in, you know, that's what I'm thinking, except I have to come up with some way to do it that involves the females having to pay. Anyway, I realize there's still a few speed bumps, a few technical details to be worked out, but I think that could be highly amusing. Is there anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Anything? Yeah. Nullus, I guess this will be the closing statement. Nullus says we must make dancing a prerequisite for the men, and that is true. Do not trust a man who cannot dance. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have come up on it. In fact, I'm even getting up on being past it. We've got some upcoming clips. I'm going to be with AA tomorrow, and then help. I'm already a few seconds past 2 hours and a half. So let me just go ahead and do it. Cigar Stream with AA tomorrow. We'll be touching upon Benjamin Barber's Jihad versus McWorld. That is tomorrow on his Cigar Stream following Women's Hour. I recommend all of you check that out. Again, that's tomorrow with Academic Agent. And then I have 2 other ones coming up. One is a discussion with a number of Christians about how, and if so, to what extent they can cooperate with the right wing, where they could make common cause and where they could not. And that will be coming up, I hope, on Saturday, the 16th. It will be as a part of the strategy series, which is coming back. And then, interestingly enough, on the 17th, I will be talking to Martin Lichtmitz, and I'm doubtless destroying his last name, so apologies, out of Austria. And we're going to be talking about apocalyptic folk and industrial. So that whole thing, Coil, Nurse with Wound, Throbbing Gristle, Death in June, that whole kind of current of Current 93, Tony Wakeford, I already mentioned him with about Ian Reed, all those guys. So we're going to be talking about that weird side current of quote unquote occult, but it also had right-wing aspects. It was tied to industrial with like Throbbing Gristle and Einstürzende Neubauten, but it also had the Death in June and the Current 93. And, today we call aspects of it neo-folk. That will be coming up on Sunday, the 17th. So look for AA tomorrow with his cigar stream. I'll be participating. Check out Christian Strategy stream on Saturday, the 16th. The Apocalyptic Folk stream with Martin Lichtmitz on the 17th. I want to get Charlemagne on here again sometime soon for something. What else am I forgetting? Yeah, follow Charlemagne's channel. Check out American Krogan. Check out Guide to Culture. Check out Millennial Woes. Go over to Odyssey, as I mentioned. Go over to Telegram. In the meantime, keep yourselves all in one piece. Thank you very much for indulging me this evening. It's been a pleasure to speak to all of you. Now I'm going to go drink some more whiskey, apple juice, and smoke. Keep yourself well. Keep yourself keep yourself peaceful. Keep yourself sane. Keep yourself wise. It's time for me to go and stop talking. I am Semigog, and I am out.